A billionaire NBA owner just said the quiet part out loud. And the number he dropped doesn't just validate what fans have known, it exposes what the WNBA has been hiding for an entire year. This is about power, money, and who really controls the narrative when the numbers can't be ignored anymore.
And there's just been a lot of controversy and attention that the WNBA is getting. What has it done right? What has it done wrong? Has the league been doing enough to protect her as a star in the face of the league? It's been almost a microcosm for just a social discussion. Do you want to just talk about that as what you see?
Caitlin Clark definitely had an effect on the WNBA. All the metrics went up. So this was last season, right? When she first came into the league from college. And we've seen all of our metrics from viewership, ticket sales, sponsorship, everything went up like almost 4x. 4x. Right.
I mean, that's incredible.
That's incredible. So the economic impact that she's made to the league is extraordinary. Undeniable.
Joe Tsai doesn't do hype. He's the co-founder of Alibaba, worth $40 billion, and he owns the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Liberty. When he speaks about business, it's not for clicks. It's because the data is undeniable. So when he sits down on the All In podcast and says Caitlin Clark generated a 4 times multiplier across viewership, ticket sales, sponsorships, and overall revenue in a single season, that's not an opinion. That's a market analysis being delivered in real time by someone who actually reads the balance sheets. 4x. Not 4% growth. Not a modest bump that marketing teams spin into success stories. 4 times the previous baseline. Quadruple the economic output. To put that in business terms, imagine a company that's been grinding for 28 years to build market share. Respectable, steady, but fundamentally limited in reach. Then one hire comes in, and in 12 months, that company's customer base, revenue streams, and brand awareness all multiply by 4. That's not incremental progress. That's paradigm disruption. And for the first time since Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, someone with actual financial authority just quantified her impact in language that can't be dismissed as fanboy enthusiasm or media narrative construction. Joe Tsai put a number to it, and that number changes everything. Because up until this moment, the conversation around Caitlin's value has been controlled by people with agendas. Players who felt overshadowed pushing back with, "The league was growing anyway," deflections. Media personalities forcing racial division angles to generate engagement. League officials who couldn't afford to admit they'd been mismanaging star development for 3 decades. But Joe Tsai doesn't care about any of that. He cares about return on investment, and his ROI report just told him, and the entire sports business world, that Caitlin Clark is the single most valuable asset the WNBA has generated in its history. Not the most talented player ever, not the greatest champion, the most valuable business asset. And if you want analysis like this every week, where we break down the actual economics and power structures behind WNBA headlines instead of recycling hot takes, you need to subscribe to WNBA Shorts right now. Because what we're about to unpack goes deeper than anyone else is willing to go. So why did it take 14 months and a Billionaire's podcast appearance for someone to say this out loud? Because admitting Caitlin Clark's impact at this scale forces every institution involved in the WNBA to confront uncomfortable truths about how they've operated for nearly 3 decades. It forces the league office to acknowledge that 28 years of slow and steady growth produce less market penetration than one transcendent rookie with the right skill set and personality. It forces veteran players to grapple with the reality that sometimes one generational talent does more for a league's visibility than 100 competent professionals grinding in relative obscurity. And it forces media ecosystems that profit from controversy to admit that the real story was never about manufactured rivalries or social narratives. It was always about whether the WNBA could produce a star that mainstream sports culture actually wanted to watch. Psychologically, that creates massive cognitive dissonance, especially for players who've dedicated 15 years to the league, wondering why attendance stayed flat and salaries stayed low, only to watch Caitlin Clark show up and arenas immediately sell out. When TV ratings spike 68% year over year, when ESPN's core audience, the people who watch SportsCenter for NFL and NBA coverage, suddenly start tuning into WNBA games consistently. That's not just growth. That's validation that the problem was never marketing budgets or investment levels. The problem was the absence of a player who could bridge the gap between basketball purists who appreciate fundamentals and casual sports fans who need star power and entertainment value. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because it means all the narratives about if they just promoted us more, or if they just gave us more media attention, we're missing the point. You can't promote your way into mainstream cultural relevance without the right product to promote. And for 3 decades, despite incredible talent in competitive basketball, the WNBA didn't have that crossover star. Now they do. And portions of the establishment spent an entire year resisting that reality. Some players took cheap shots on the court. Some made passive-aggressive comments in interviews. Some media members tried to reframe her success as a controversy about race and resentment instead of a meritocracy story about skill and marketability. But Tsai doesn't operate in that world. He operates in spreadsheets and quarterly reports, and his data just told him that the single best business decision the WNBA has made in its existence was drafting Caitlin Clark first overall. Now, some will argue this is reductive, that crediting one player ignores decades of foundation building by pioneers like Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops, Diana Taurasi. That the league's current growth is the result of cumulative effort, not individual impact. And here's why that argument, while emotionally understandable, is economically inaccurate. Yes, the WNBA exists because legends built credibility and competitive infrastructure. But credibility without audience reach is just respect without revenue. And the league had credibility for decades. What it didn't have was mainstream market penetration. Caitlin Clark changed that. Not because she's objectively better than every player who came before her, though her skill set is elite, but because her style, confidence, swagger, and cultural timing created a perfect storm that mainstream sports audiences were ready to embrace. That's not diminishing the past. That's understanding how market breakthroughs actually happen. If you're getting value from this breakdown, real business analysis, not just opinions, hit that subscribe button for WNBA Shorts. We do this every week. Real numbers, real dynamics, no fluff. Let's keep going. Tsai brought up the Angel Reese rivalry in his interview, and he handled it the way a smart owner should. Acknowledge it exists in the media ecosystem, then redirect to what actually matters, which is skill and economic impact. But let's be surgical about what's really happening with this narrative, because it reveals everything wrong with how the WNBA has been marketed for years. Caitlin Clark has never positioned Angel Reese as a rival. She's complimented her game multiple times. She's acknowledged her talent publicly. She's moved on from college. That chapter is closed in her mind. Angel Reese, on the other hand, has kept the narrative alive at every opportunity. From the "you can't see me" gesture during the college championship, to repeated social media references, to interviews where she frames herself as Caitlin's counterpart and equal rival. This isn't a mutual competitive dynamic. This is one player leveraging another player's star power for positioning and brand building. And strategically, that's fine. That's modern sports marketing. Create a storyline, ride the wave, build your profile. But let's not pretend this is an authentic basketball rivalry when one side has clearly let it go professionally and the other keeps bringing it back up for content and relevance. Tsai was diplomatic when he said, "It's always good to have rivalries." From a business perspective, he's not wrong. Rivalries sell tickets. Drama drives engagement. The WNBA needs compelling storylines beyond just watching basketball. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, and to his credit, Tsai called this out directly. He said, "Some people would like to pit it as a racial thing. We need to look past that and just look at the skill set being brought into the league." That's the smartest, most honest thing said in that entire interview. Because the moment media narratives racialize this rivalry in ways that have nothing to do with basketball performance, you diminish both players. You reduce Caitlin Clark's historic economic impact to her identity instead of her skill set and marketability. You reduce Angel Reese's legitimate talent and personality to a social construct instead of her actual game. At a human level, fans don't want forced culture war framing imposed on sports. They want to watch great basketball and compelling personalities. And when you give them that, when you let the product speak instead of manufacturing controversy, they show up. 4 times more of them, according to Tsai's own business metrics. So the rivalry narrative? It served a purpose during March Madness. It drove ratings for the college championship. But in the professional space, it's starting to feel manufactured and exhausting. Because Caitlin moved on, the fans moved on. The only people still clinging to it are media personalities who need the engagement, and one player who built her brand partially on that antagonism. And that's fine for her. But it's not a rivalry, it's a marketing strategy. Let's be honest about what we're watching. Let's talk about what 4X growth actually means in concrete business terms. Because this isn't just a feel-good story about a rising star. This is a case study in market transformation that business schools will study for decades. When Tsai says viewership went up 4 times, he's talking about millions of new viewers. Not basketball junkies who already followed the WNBA religiously. The ESPN crowd, the SportsCenter demographic. Casual sports fans who check NBA scores and watch NFL Red Zone, but had never once in their lives clicked on a WNBA game. Those people are now watching. Consistently. That's audience expansion at a scale the league has never experienced. When he says ticket sales went up 4 times, he's talking about secondary market prices spiking, season ticket waitlists forming, and arenas that previously gave away tickets to fill seats now selling out weeks in advance. The Liberty saw it directly. The Fever saw it in Indianapolis. Every arena Caitlin Clark visited saw attendance records shattered. That's not hype, that's demand creation. When he says sponsorships went up 4 times, he's talking about Fortune 500 companies that previously wouldn't return the WNBA's phone calls, now bidding for partnership deals and jersey patches. He's talking about brands that want association with growth and cultural momentum, which is exactly what Caitlin delivered. That's not incremental improvement, that's market revaluation. And it happened in 1 season, 1 player, 1 rookie campaign. Now here's the part that should terrify the WNBA if leadership is paying attention. All of that 4X growth is tied to one person. If Caitlin Clark gets injured long-term, if she burns out from the pressure and physicality, if she decides overseas opportunities pay better and are less toxic, or if she simply retires early because the league fails to protect and properly compensate her, that 4X multiplier could evaporate just as fast as it appeared. Tsai understands this. That's why he went out of his way to publicly praise her impact. That's why the Liberty organization treated her with respect when she visited. That's why he mentioned that Caitlin herself said that Tsais are the best owners in the WNBA. Because smart ownership recognizes that you don't just ride a star's momentum. You invest in infrastructure around it. You protect the asset. You build systems so the growth becomes sustainable instead of dependent on one individual. But not every WNBA franchise operates that way. Some organizations still act like they're doing players a favor by employing them. Some coaches run outdated systems that don't showcase star talent. Some league officials make decisions that prioritize optics and politics over economic outcomes and player experience. And that's the existential risk. The WNBA finally has mainstream momentum after nearly 3 decades. But if they mismanage this window, if they fumble the CBA negotiations, if they fail to protect their stars from unnecessary physicality and hostility, if they let egos and grievance politics override sound business practices, This 4x growth could be remembered as a peak instead of a foundation. Tsai just gave the league a roadmap. He quantified the value. He showed them what's possible when you get the formula right. Now the question is whether anyone in WNBA leadership is actually listening, or whether they'll let institutional dysfunction squander the biggest opportunity in the league's history.
This is exactly why WNBA Shorts exists, to break down the business realities, the power dynamics, and the institutional failures that shape this league. Drop a comment with your take. Does the WNBA deserve this growth? Or did they just get lucky that Caitlyn showed up? And make sure you're subscribed because we've got more coming. Tsai confirmed what everyone with eyes already knew, but few had the courage or the data to say out loud. Caitlyn Clark didn't just join the WNBA. She fundamentally transformed its economic trajectory. 4 times the viewership, 4 times the revenue, 4 times the cultural attention. That's not a trend. That's a revolution. But revolutions only succeed when institutions adapt. And right now, the WNBA is standing at a crossroads with 2 very different paths forward. Path 1. They recognize that star-driven leagues work. They invest in player development not just on the court, but in media training, personal branding, and marketability. They protect their stars instead of allowing jealousy and politics to create toxic environments. They build infrastructure around Caitlyn, around Paige Buchers when she enters the league, and around the next generation of players who can carry mainstream cultural appeal. They lock in a CBA that reflects the league's new economic reality. They expand intelligently. They capitalize on momentum. Path 2. They treat this as a lucky anomaly. They go back to committee-driven marketing that produces bland, forgettable content. They let egos and grievance narratives override business decisions. They fumble the CBA by refusing to share revenue proportionally. They lose Caitlyn to burnout or overseas opportunities. And in 5 years, we're back to half-empty arenas, niche viewership, and a league that everyone respects but nobody watches. Tsai just told them which path leads to success. He quantified it with his own franchise's financial data. For X, the question isn't whether Caitlyn Clark changed the league. That's settled. The question is whether the league is capable of institutional change, whether leadership can set aside politics and pride long enough to build around what actually works. Because talent meets opportunity every generation in sports. But only the smartest organizations know how to turn that collision into sustained legacy instead of a flash-in-the-pan moment that gets wasted. And that's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because the WNBA has a documented history of mismanaging stars, of letting political correctness override performance-based merit, of treating players like interchangeable parts instead of differentiated assets. If they do that to Caitlyn Clark, if they waste this 4x opportunity because institutional dysfunction can't get out its own way, it won't just be a missed business opportunity. It'll be proof that the league was never serious about competing for mainstream sport relevance in the first place. So the real question going forward isn't about Caitlyn. She's already proven what she is. The real question is about the WNBA. Are they ready to be the league their best player just prove they could be? Or will they let this moment slip away because change is hard and protecting the status quo is easier? We're about to find out. And the answer will determine whether women's basketball becomes a mainstream fixture or remains a niche product that couldn't capitalize on its biggest gift. Thanks for watching. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on what's really happening in the WNBA, hit that like button. Drop a comment. Does the league deserve this 4x growth? Or are they just lucky Caitlyn showed up when she did? And make sure you're subscribed to WNBA Shorts because we got more deep dives coming that cut through the narratives and get to the truth. I'll see you in the next one.